Thomas had been working at Kepler Station for 7 years, and nobody really knew his name. They called him the human, or sometimes that mechanic guy, when they bothered to acknowledge him at all. He spent his days in the lowest levels of the station, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the smell of recycled air. His hands were always dirty, his clothes always stained with grease, and his face always tired from the endless work. The station was like a small city floating in space. It had thousands of workers from different planets and species. Some were tall and green with extra arms. Some had scales that shimmered in the artificial light. Some didn't even have bodies that looked like Thomas's body. They all seemed to belong there, but Thomas felt like he was always on the outside looking in. The other engineers treated him like a joke. They would laugh when he walked past them in the corridors. They would shake their heads when he tried to join conversations in the break room. One time he tried to suggest a better way to repair a cooling system, and they all just stared at him like he was stupid. They used the old way anyway, and it took them 3 days to fix it. Thomas's way would have taken only 1 day. Thomas lived in a small room by himself. It had 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 table, and 1 small window that showed the darkness of space. He spent most of his free time staring out that window, watching the stars, and wondering if anyone would ever see him as more than just a poor mechanic who didn't know what he was doing. His job was to fix the small things that nobody else wanted to fix. While the important engineers worked on big systems and important ships, Thomas fixed water pipes and air vents and old machinery that had been broken for months. The station supervisors didn't care how long these repairs took because nobody important used these systems. Thomas cared though. He cared very much. He would spend hours studying broken machines, understanding how they worked, trying to find new and better ways to fix them. Sometimes he would fix something that had been broken for years, and nobody would even thank him. They would just use it and forget about it. One day something strange happened. Elena came to find him in the maintenance tunnels. Elena was a Vrelian, which meant she had beautiful iridescent skin that changed color when the light hit it just right. She was one of the few people at the station who was always nice to Thomas. She would smile at him in the corridors, and sometimes she would ask him questions about his work, which made him feel like maybe he did matter a little bit. Elena looked excited about something. Her antennae, which were like long feelers on top of her head, were twitching back and forth really fast. This meant she was very happy or very nervous about something. "Thomas, I have a surprise for you," she said, her face glowing with a huge smile. Thomas looked up from the power coupling he was fixing. His heart started beating a little faster. The last time someone had tried to give him a surprise, it had been a prank where they put green dye in his shower. He was suspicious, but Elena looked genuinely happy, not mean. "What kind of surprise?" Thomas asked carefully. "We have found someone for you," Elena said. "A blind date. Tomorrow at 1800 hours. Hangar 7. Thomas felt something drop in his stomach. A blind date. The other workers were setting him up on a blind date. This was definitely going to be a prank. He could already picture it. They would arrange for someone to stand him up, or someone who would take one look at him and laugh, or worse, they would send a robot or an alien creature designed to make him look foolish. His colleagues loved pranks like this. But as he looked at Elena's face, he saw that she actually seemed to mean it. She looked like she wanted this to be something good for him. And something deep inside Thomas, something that had been lonely and sad for a very long time, wanted to believe her. "Really?" Thomas asked quietly. "Really?" Elena said. "You deserve to have fun, Thomas. You work so hard. Nobody sees it, but I see it. You fix things that nobody else can fix. You are smart and kind, and you should go on this date. Will you go?" Thomas nodded slowly. His hands were shaking a little bit. Elena clapped her hands together happily and left the maintenance tunnel, her skin flickering through different colors of joy. After she left, Thomas sat down on a metal crate and tried to think. Was this a prank or not? He couldn't tell anymore. Part of him wanted to skip the date entirely and hide in his room. But another part of him, a part that was tired of being alone and tired of being invisible, wanted to believe that something good could happen to him. That night, Thomas barely slept. He lay in his small bed and stared at the ceiling, his mind racing with possibilities. What if it was a prank? What if he went to Hangar 7 and everyone was waiting there to laugh at him? But what if Elena was telling the truth? What if there really was someone who wanted to meet him? What if he was finally going to have a chance to be seen as more than just the poor mechanic? By morning, Thomas had made a decision. He was going to go to the blind date. He was going to take a chance. He was tired of being invisible, tired of being alone, tired of watching other people enjoy things while he worked in the darkness fixing machines that nobody cared about. He spent the whole day preparing. He took a long shower, washing away all the grease and dirt from his work. He put on his cleanest uniform, the one he saved for special occasions. He even combed his hair and tried to make himself look presentable. He wanted to look like someone who mattered, even if just for one evening. As the time grew closer, Thomas felt nervous and excited and terrified all at the same time. He walked through the corridors of Kepler Station toward Hangar 7, aware of the looks his colleagues were giving him. They were watching. They were waiting to see what would happen. Whatever was about to happen, everyone at the station was paying attention. Thomas took a deep breath and walked into Hangar 7, not knowing that his entire life was about to change. Thomas stepped into Hangar 7 with his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his own ears. The hangar was massive, much bigger than he expected. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into shadows. Bright lights hung from metal beams, casting everything in sharp, white light. The floor was smooth and clean, not like the dirty maintenance tunnels where Thomas spent most of his time. There were a few workers scattered around, pretending to do their jobs but clearly watching to see what would happen. Thomas saw her standing near the observation window. She stood very still, very straight, like someone who had been trained to hold themselves with perfect control. She wore a military uniform, gray and clean with shiny medals and pins on her chest. Her hair was dark and pulled back tightly from her face. She looked strong and serious and nothing like anyone Thomas had ever met before. As Thomas got closer, he noticed that everyone in the hangar had stopped working. The maintenance crews had turned away from their equipment. The dock workers had stepped back from their machinery. Even the automated systems seemed to have grown quieter. It was like the whole hangar was holding its breath. The woman turned to face him. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, and they looked directly at Thomas like she could see all the way through him to something inside. She was taller than Thomas, with shoulders that looked like they carried heavy responsibilities. There was something about the way she stood that made Thomas feel very small. "Engineer Venn," the woman said. Her voice was clear and strong, like a bell ringing through the hangar. "I am Admiral Catherine Howell, Coalition Expeditionary Fleet." Thomas heard someone gasp behind him. He turned around quickly to see that everyone in the hangar was now openly staring. The maintenance crews had abandoned any pretense of working. The dock workers stood frozen, their hands still on their equipment. Even a robot that had been moving boxes had stopped in the middle of motion. Thomas turned back to look at the Admiral. His mouth was completely dry. He could not think of a single word to say. Admiral Catherine Howell was one of the most famous people in the entire coalition. Thomas had seen her face on news broadcasts many times. He had heard stories about her in the break rooms, stories that other workers whispered about when they thought no one important was listening. She had won battles that military experts said were impossible to win. She had saved entire colonies from destruction. She had made peace between species that had been enemies for hundreds of years. She was a legend, a hero, someone that people made statues of. And she was standing right in front of Thomas, looking at him like he was someone worth her time. "I understand this is unconventional," Admiral Howell said. She gestured toward a quieter section of the hangar, away from all the staring eyes. "Walk with me." Thomas nodded because he still could not speak. He walked with the Admiral to a corner of the hangar where there were fewer workers, fewer eyes watching them. As they walked, Thomas became very aware of how dirty his uniform was, even though he had tried to clean himself up. He became aware of how his hands were still stained with grease from his morning work. He became aware of how ordinary and plain and unremarkable he was compared to this woman. The Admiral stopped walking and turned to face him. She looked at him for a long moment without saying anything. Thomas felt like she was studying him, trying to understand something about him that he did not understand about himself. "I have been reviewing your work," the Admiral said finally. "Your maintenance logs. Your repair records. The systems you have fixed over the years." Thomas's stomach dropped. He was being criticized. She was going to tell him that he was not good enough, that he should not be here, that the whole thing had been a mistake. "6 months ago, you repaired the quantum stabilizer on a ship called the Meridian," the Admiral continued. "That repair should have been impossible. The stabilizer requires 3 different types of technology working together in perfect harmony. Those 3 types come from 3 different species. Their basic principles are incompatible with each other. By all the rules of engineering, what you did should have destroyed the ship." Thomas felt his face get hot. He opened his mouth to explain, to apologize, to say something, but the Admiral held up her hand. "But it did not destroy the ship," she said. "The Meridian is still flying. That repair has held for 6 months without failure. I have had my best engineers study your work. They cannot understand how you made it work. They say it should be impossible, but you made it possible anyway." Thomas felt confused. This did not sound like criticism. This sounded like praise? Could it be? I see what others do not see, Thomas said quietly. His voice sounded very small in the huge hangar. When I look at broken machines, I do not see all the separate pieces. I see how they want to work together. I see the patterns. Once I see the patterns, I can usually fix things. The Admiral nodded slowly. She seemed satisfied with his answer. That is a rare gift, she said. Most engineers are taught one way to do things. They learn the rules. They follow the rules. But you see beyond the rules. You see the truth beneath the rules. Thomas did not know what to say to that. Nobody had ever described his work like that before. To everyone else at the station, he was just the poor mechanic who fixed broken pipes and old machines. I am assembling a team, the Admiral said, for an important mission. I need people who think differently. People who can solve problems that have never been solved before. People who can see what others cannot see. She looked directly into Thomas's eyes. I need you, Engineer Venn. Will you join me? Thomas stood there stunned. Behind them, the hangar was completely quiet. Every worker, every crew member, everyone was listening to every word. Word of this moment would spread across the entire station within hours. Everyone would know that the poor mechanic, the invisible man, had just been chosen by an admiral. Yes, Thomas said, his voice shaking slightly. Yes, I will join you. The Admiral smiled, just a small smile, but it was genuine. Good, she said. Then your old life ends today. Your new life begins now. Thomas followed Admiral Howell through the corridors of Kepler Station. They walked away from the main areas, past the places where workers moved about their daily jobs. Thomas could feel eyes on him as they passed, workers pointing at him, whispering to each other. The poor mechanic was walking with an admiral. This was something that had never happened before at the station. They entered a small meeting room, sealed and private. The admiral locked the door behind them. There were no windows, just gray metal walls and a simple table with 2 chairs. The admiral gestured for Thomas to sit down. Thomas sat, his mind still spinning. He could not believe this was real. A few hours ago he was fixing broken pipes in the maintenance tunnels. Now he was sitting in a private room with one of the most famous military officers in the entire galaxy. I need to tell you the truth about today, Admiral Howell said. She sat down across from him. The blind date was not a coincidence. Thomas felt something tighten in his chest. He had been right. It was a prank after all. He had known it was too good to be true. It was planned, the Admiral continued. Elena did not come to you by accident. She was following my orders. I arranged for her to invite you to Hangar 7 at exactly 1800 hours. I knew you would come because you are the kind of person who hopes for good things, even when people treat you poorly. Thomas felt his face grow hot with shame and anger. They had tricked him. Everyone at the station had been part of this trick. Even Elena, who had always been kind to him, had been lying to him. I understand you feel betrayed, the Admiral said, watching his face carefully. But please, let me explain why I did this. Thomas did not say anything. He just stared at the table in front of him. For the past 3 years, I have been looking for someone special, the Admiral said. Someone who thinks differently than other people. Someone who can solve problems that regular engineers cannot solve. I have searched through thousands of records, thousands of workers across the coalition. And I found you. Thomas looked up at her. I found you by accident, the Admiral continued. I was looking through maintenance logs for a ship that had been damaged beyond repair. The records showed that someone had fixed it. The repair should have been impossible, but it had worked. I wanted to know who had done this impossible repair. That is when I first saw your name. The Admiral stood up and walked around the room as she talked. Thomas watched her move. She had the kind of confidence that came from years of making important decisions, from knowing that people would follow her commands. I looked deeper, she said. I found more repairs like that one. Repairs that should not have been possible. Repairs that violated every rule of engineering but worked anyway. I found 17 different repairs over 7 years, all done by the same person. You, Thomas Venn. Thomas listened carefully. This was different from what he had expected to hear. I started asking questions, the Admiral said. I wanted to know about the person who had done these repairs. I learned that you worked at Kepler Station. I learned that you were a human, and that most people at the station did not respect your work. They saw you as someone who was not very good at their job. The Admiral stopped walking and turned to face Thomas. But that made sense to me, she said. If you were good at doing things the normal way, you would be working with the important engineers on important ships. The fact that you were fixing broken pipes meant that nobody understood what you were actually doing. Nobody understood that you were not following the normal rules because the normal rules do not work for you. You see things differently. That is why your colleagues did not understand you. Thomas felt something shift inside his chest. This woman was describing him as if he was special, not broken. I sent agents to Kepler Station, the Admiral said. I told them to watch you, to see how you worked, to understand how your mind worked. They reported back to me that you were exactly what I was looking for. You were lonely. You were invisible. You were underestimated. And you were brilliant. The Admiral sat back down in her chair, facing Thomas directly. So I decided to meet you, she said. But I did not want to approach you as an admiral. I did not want you to say yes to me because you were afraid of a military officer. I wanted to meet you as a person so that you could make your choice freely. That is why I had Elena invite you to a blind date. That is why I arranged for this to happen in Hangar 7 instead of my office. Thomas thought about this. He thought about how the Admiral had dressed in a military uniform anyway, so he had immediately known who she was. He thought about how she had not really hidden her identity at all. But you wore your uniform, Thomas said finally. You showed me your medals and your rank immediately. The Admiral nodded. I wanted you to know who I was, she said. I wanted you to understand that this was serious. I wanted you to feel the weight of what I was asking. If I had dressed as a regular person, you might have thought I was just another worker trying to trick you. But when you saw the uniform, you understood that this was real. You understood that someone important actually saw your value. Thomas looked at the Admiral's face. She was watching him carefully, waiting to see if he understood. Everyone at the station knows now, Thomas said. Everyone saw me with you in the hangar. They know that an Admiral came looking for me. They know that I am not just the poor mechanic anymore. Yes, the Admiral said. By tomorrow morning your old life will be completely different. Your colleagues will treat you with respect because they will be afraid of you. They will be afraid because an Admiral chose you. That fear will turn into respect because humans and most intelligent beings respect power and success. The Admiral leaned forward slightly. But more importantly, she said, you now know that you are not broken. You are not stupid. You are not invisible. You have been ignored because you see the world in a way that most people cannot understand. And that ability, that gift you have, is exactly what I need for the mission I am planning. Thomas felt tears in his eyes. For 7 years he had believed that he was not good enough. For 7 years he had accepted that he would never be important or valued. And now, suddenly, someone was telling him that everything he had believed about himself was wrong. The blind date was real, the Admiral said softly. It just was not what you expected it to be. I came here to meet you because I believe in you. I came here to offer you a chance to do something that matters. Something that will change history. Thomas nodded slowly. He understood now. The trick had not been cruel. It had been necessary. It had been the only way to make sure he would come and meet her. What happens now? Thomas asked. Now, Admiral Howell said, you pack your things. You leave Kepler Station forever. And you come with me to board the flagship of the Coalition Expeditionary Fleet. Your real work begins. Thomas stood on the observation deck of the ship called the Resolute. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his entire life. The ship was enormous, with corridors that stretched for what seemed like miles in every direction. The walls were smooth and clean and made of materials that Thomas had never seen before. There were lights built into the walls that changed color depending on what system they were monitoring. Screens showed information from thousands of different sensors spread across the entire ship. Admiral Howell had brought him here directly from Kepler Station. They had traveled in a small military vessel, a fast ship that had carried them through space in just a few hours. Now Thomas stood looking out at the stars, trying to understand that his entire world had changed in just one day. The Resolute is the flagship of the Coalition Expeditionary Fleet, the Admiral said. She stood beside him, also looking out at the stars. It is the most advanced ship ever built. It has technology from 17 different species, all working together in perfect harmony. Most ships have teams of hundreds of engineers maintaining their systems. The Resolute has only 50. Thomas turned to look at her. 50 engineers for a ship this size? He asked. That seems impossible. It is, the Admiral said. Which is why I need you. They walked through the corridors of the ship. Thomas saw other crew members as they passed. Some had bodies like humans. Some looked completely alien, with tentacles or extra limbs or skin that glowed in the darkness. They all wore military uniforms and moved with purpose and confidence. This was not like Kepler Station, where people seemed to just move around without any clear direction. Everyone here seemed to know exactly what they were doing and why. The Admiral took Thomas to the engine room. It was the heart of the ship, the place where all the power was generated that made the Resolute move through space. Thomas had never seen anything like it. There were systems stacked on top of each other, machines connected to other machines by cables and tubes, and strange devices that he did not have names for. The air hummed with energy. "These engines should not work together," the Admiral said. "The power generators come from one species. The distribution system comes from another species. The control mechanisms come from a third species. None of these systems were designed to work together. But someone figured out how to make them work. Someone understood the patterns beneath the technology and created harmony where there should have been conflict." Thomas walked closer to the engines. He could see the patterns immediately. His mind worked like that. He could look at broken things and see how they could be fixed. He could look at systems that did not work together and see how to make them communicate. "I did not do this," Thomas said, turning back to the Admiral. "No," she agreed. "One of my previous engineers did. But that engineer is dead now. He died 3 months ago in an accident. Since then, the Resolute has been struggling. The systems work, but they are not working as well as they should. Small problems are appearing. Problems that my other engineers cannot fix." The Admiral gestured around the engine room. "I need someone who thinks like that engineer did," she said. "Someone who can see the patterns. Someone who can make these incompatible systems work together in perfect harmony. I believe that person is you." They left the engine room and went to a large office. The Admiral sat behind a desk. Thomas stood in front of her, waiting to hear what she would say next. "I am going to offer you a position," Admiral Howell said. "Chief Engineer of the Resolute. You will lead a team of 49 other engineers from across the coalition. You will have access to any resources you need. You will have the authority to make decisions about the ship's systems without asking permission. And you will have my complete support in everything you do." Thomas could hardly breathe. This was more than he had ever imagined possible. "There is a mission," the Admiral continued. "A very important mission. There is a place in space called the Veil. We do not know much about it, but ships have been disappearing there. Coalition vessels have gone to investigate, and they have not returned. The few ships that managed to escape reported that their systems were failing in ways that do not make sense. Their instruments could not measure what was happening. Their engines would stop working for no reason. Some ships reported that the laws of physics seemed different in the Veil." The Admiral leaned forward. "We are sending the Resolute to the Veil," she said. "We are going to find out what is causing ships to disappear. We are going to understand what is happening in that place. And we are going to find a way to survive it. That is where I need you, Thomas. I need someone who can think beyond the normal rules of engineering. I need someone who can understand systems that do not follow normal physics." Thomas felt fear and excitement mixed together inside him. This was dangerous. Ships were disappearing out there. People were dying. But this was also the most important work he could imagine doing. "What if I fail?" Thomas asked. "Then you will fail," the Admiral said simply. "And the mission will fail, and perhaps the Resolute will be destroyed and we will all die. But that is the nature of exploration. We do not know what we will find out there. We do not know if we can survive it. But we must try, because if we do not, the coalition will be destroyed eventually anyway. Whatever is in the Veil will eventually come to us." The Admiral stood up and walked to the window of her office. She looked out at the stars the same way Thomas had been looking at them on the observation deck. "You have spent 7 years being invisible," she said. "You have spent 7 years fixing broken pipes while brilliant minds worked on important problems somewhere else. No one saw your value. No one understood what you could do. But that changes now." She turned back to face Thomas. "If you come with me, you will be seen," she said. "If you come with me, your work will matter. If you come with me, you will discover if you are truly as extraordinary as I believe you are. You will find out if you can solve problems that no one else in the galaxy can solve. You will find out if you can make a difference." The Admiral extended her hand toward Thomas. "So I am asking you, Thomas Venn," she said. "Will you join me? Will you become the chief engineer of the Resolute? Will you help me save the coalition?" Thomas looked at her hand. He thought about his small room at Kepler Station. He thought about the 7 years he had spent being ignored and invisible. He thought about his colleagues who had mocked him. He thought about all the broken machines he had fixed that no one had ever thanked him for. And then he reached out and took the Admiral's hand. "Yes," he said. "I will join you." Thomas stood in the engine room of the Resolute, surrounded by engineers from across the galaxy. They looked at him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to doubt. Some of them had been working on coalition ships for decades. Some of them had advanced degrees from the most prestigious academies in space. And now they had to take orders from a human who had spent 7 years fixing broken pipes at a station nobody important cared about. "I know you do not know me," Thomas said, speaking to his team for the first time as their chief engineer. "I know that some of you think I do not belong here. I know that some of you think this is a mistake. But I need you to trust me. I need you to work with me. Together, we are going to do something that no one else in the galaxy has been able to do." One of the engineers, a tall being with scales and 4 arms, raised his hand. "What makes you qualified?" he asked. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "What experience do you have leading a team?" Thomas did not answer immediately. He walked over to the main engine control panel and pointed to a section of it. "This system," he said, "should not work. The power distribution here comes from Vrelian technology. The monitoring system comes from Caustrian design. The safety protocols come from human engineering. These 3 systems have completely different logic structures. They should conflict with each other constantly. But they do not. Do you know why?" Nobody answered. "Because someone understood that conflict comes from trying to force things to work the same way," Thomas said. "Instead of making all 3 systems the same, someone found a way to let them be different. They created a translation layer, a bridge that allows each system to communicate with the others in its own language. That is what I do. I find the bridges between broken things. I find the connections that should not exist but do." Thomas looked at each member of his team. "I have never led a team before. But I have been solving problems my entire life. And right now the Resolute has a problem. These engines are not working as well as they should. I'm going to fix them. And I am going to do it my way. If you want to help me, stay. If you do not believe in me, leave." No one left. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas worked almost without sleeping. He studied every system on the Resolute. He talked to every engineer. He asked them to explain how things worked, and then he would go away and think about what they had told him. Slowly he began to see the patterns. He began to understand the logic that connected all the different technologies together. He made small changes at first. He adjusted a power flow here. He modified a signal frequency there. After each change he would test the systems to see if they worked better. Most of his changes made no difference. Some of them made things worse. But Thomas kept trying, kept thinking, kept looking for the patterns. Then one evening, as he was studying the energy distribution charts, something clicked in his mind. He saw it clearly. He saw the entire system as if it was a single organism instead of many separate machines. He understood what needed to be done. Thomas worked through the night, making changes to the engine systems. He integrated technologies in ways that violated every engineering protocol. He connected Vrelian power systems directly to Caustrian monitoring equipment. He created new pathways that should have caused explosions but instead created elegant harmony. When morning came, Thomas activated the engines with his new configuration. The entire ship seemed to come alive. The engines hummed with a sound that was almost like music. The power flowed through the systems with perfect efficiency. Every meter showed optimal readings. Every sensor showed that all systems were working together in perfect synchronization. The other engineers stood in stunned silence. "It works," someone whispered. "It is beautiful," another engineer said. Thomas felt tears in his eyes. For the first time in his life, he had created something that mattered. He had solved a problem that important people had not been able to solve. Admiral Howell arrived in the engine room minutes later. She looked at the readings and then looked at Thomas. She smiled. "Well done, Chief Engineer," she said. "You are ready for the Veil." The journey to the Veil took 3 weeks. During that time, Thomas continued to improve the ship's systems. He found small problems and fixed them. He optimized power distribution. He increased the efficiency of the shield generators. By the time they arrived at the Veil, the Resolute was running better than any ship in the Coalition fleet. But nothing could have prepared Thomas for what they found there. The Veil was not a place. It was an absence of place. Space itself seemed broken there. The laws of physics did not work the way they should. Sensors could not measure distance correctly. Time seemed to move differently in different parts of the Veil. Ship's systems began failing almost immediately. The crew of the Resolute panicked. Engineers ran around trying to fix systems that were breaking faster than they could repair them. The captain wanted to turn around and leave. But Thomas saw the patterns. "Do not fight the Veil," he told Admiral Howell. "The Veil is not trying to destroy us. The Veil is just different. It works according to different rules. Instead of trying to make our systems work the old way, we need to let our systems adapt to how the Veil works." He went to the engine room and made radical changes. He disconnected the traditional safety systems. He allowed the engines to operate in ways that should have been impossible. He created new systems on the fly, drawing on knowledge from his entire engineering team, combining ideas in new and unexpected ways. The Resolute did not just survive the Veil. The Resolute thrived in it. As they moved deeper into the Veil, they discovered its secret. There was an ancient gateway, built by a civilization that had existed millions of years ago. The gateway was so advanced, so far beyond current understanding, that it bent space and time around it. That was what made the Veil so strange. That was what destroyed ships that tried to fight it. Thomas's approach of working with the Veil instead of against it had allowed them to get close to the gateway. They were able to study it. They were able to understand its basic principles. And they were able to map its location for future exploration. When the Resolute returned to Coalition space, the news spread like fire. The flagship had not just survived the Veil. It had unlocked its greatest secret. The ancient gateway promised new worlds, new knowledge, new possibilities for the entire Coalition. Thomas received medals and commendations. Admirals from across the galaxy wanted to speak with him. The most prestigious academies offered him teaching positions. News broadcasts showed his face and told his story. The poor mechanic from Kepler Station had become a hero. But what Thomas valued most was when Elena came to see him on the Resolute. She stood in front of him, her antennae drooping slightly in shame. "I was part of the trick," she said. "I helped deceive you." Thomas smiled at her. "You helped change my life," he said. "If you had not brought me to that hangar, I would still be fixing broken pipes. I would still be invisible." 6 months later, Thomas returned to Kepler Station. He walked through the corridors where he had spent 7 years working in obscurity. His old colleagues stared at him. Some tried to speak to him. Some looked away in embarrassment. They had all seen the news. They all knew what he had accomplished. They all understood that they had been wrong about him. Thomas did not stay long at the station. He had no reason to stay. He had a new life now, a life of discovery and importance and meaning. He boarded a shuttle that took him back to the Resolute, back to Admiral Howell, back to work that mattered. As the shuttle rose away from Kepler Station, Thomas looked down at the place where he had been lonely and invisible for so long. He felt no anger toward it. He only felt gratitude. The station had taught him patience. It had taught him to see things differently. It had prepared him for something greater. The stars stretched ahead of him, infinite and full of mysteries waiting to be solved. Thomas Venn, the poor mechanic from Kepler Station, was finally where he belonged.